I believe we are live on Facebook and we are ready to get started. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Florida Nature Walk. My name is Margaret Davenport and I am the Jill Abrahamson Memorial Environmental Education Intern. And today we are joining Mr. Dustin as he sort of explores the scrub weather depending. Remember, all participants are muted and your video cameras are off. To use the chat button, it's at the bottom of the screen, and you can use it to communicate with Mr. Dustin, other participants, and myself. Please make sure to choose all panelists and attendees so everyone can see your wonderful comments. There's also the Q&A button to ask questions for Mr. Dustin and our guests that they can answer at the end of the field trip. That's all I have to say. Dustin, are you out there?
I am out here. Good morning, buenos dias. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we have two awesome guests, two research interns from our Avian Ecology Lab talking about Florida scrub jays, our favorite bird here at Archbold. And for my part, I'm going to do things a little bit different today because the weather is threatening to drop not just some rain on us out here, but also lightning. And whenever there's a threat of lightning, we take that very seriously because Florida is the lightning strike capital of North America. So what I thought I'd do is stick close to home here, stick near the buildings. The good news there is I was realizing we have not done an episode yet that has focused on the green design of our learning center and lodge for college students and landscaping here. We haven't really talked about it, and it's really interesting stuff. So that's what we're going to focus on today, intermixed with some Florida scrub jay stuff. Now, when I say to you green design, or I want to show you some green buildings, you probably know what I mean by that, that I'm talking about environmentally friendly design. The type of design that means that you use less energy in those buildings. Maybe you use recycled materials to make them. Designs that have less of an impact, a negative impact on the environment. So if I turn the camera around here, you can see the two buildings behind me. So this one here is the Francis Archbold Huffy Learning Center. Those windows there, that's my office right there. And Margaret is on the other side, further in there. So that's our learning center. And when we have field trips in normal years and summer camps that are in person, this is the home base right there. And then right next to it on this side of me is our lodge. This is mostly a site for college students to visit here and stay here. There's rooms with bunk beds in there, and we do have lots of schools come throughout the year. We have some schools you might recognize the names of Cornell, Yale, Harvard, all come down every year or so, and their students stay in the lodge there. These two buildings and all these plants around me were put in 2011, and I was hired just about a year after it all opened up. And there's all kinds of things that the architect did to help make this an environmentally friendly spot right here. So we're going to go into some of those things. And the first has to do with rain, with harvesting the rain. So we're going to put a video on. It's about 4.5 minutes showing what does it mean to harvest the rain and how does that work right here. So we're thinking smart design, green design. Enjoy.
Archbold Biological Station is an ecological research, conservation, and education center in South Central Florida. It's located on 9,000 acres of globally threatened Florida scrub habitat. Archbold has just opened its learning center and lodge, certified as LEED Platinum, the highest possible rating for green buildings. In addition, the buildings are Florida Water Star certified by the Southwest Florida Water Management District. This is the second video in a new Archbold series, Going Green, and shares what we learned from our green construction. We get a lot of rain in Florida. Around Archbold, it averages 53 inches every year. That's nearly 4.5 feet of rain. Even though we get a lot of rain, in South Florida, most of it falls in the rainy season, from June through October. November through May can be a period of extreme drought. In natural habitats, like in the scrub at Archbold, the rain soaks into the ground or runs off into wetlands. Evaporates from lakes and wetlands, or is transpired, or released back into the atmosphere, by plants. Rain also falls onto surfaces that don't absorb water, like roads, parking areas, and roofs, where the water runs off very fast. Early settlers in Florida did not let the rain falling on their roofs go to waste. They collected the rainwater as a source of water for themselves, their livestock, and their crops. The harvested rainwater was stored in a large container known as a cistern. Just like nature, cisterns work on the principle of collecting or harvesting as much water as possible during the rainy season and then storing it for use later when it's dry. At Archbold's new Learning Center, we revived the tradition of using a rainwater cistern, but we added some modern upgrades to bring rainwater harvesting into the 21st century. We had 3 conservation reasons for installing rainwater harvesting. 1, to reduce the amount of stormwater runoff flowing from our roofs into our ditches. 2, to reduce the amount of precious groundwater we pump from the Floridan aquifer to meet our needs. And 3, to reduce the amount of chemical treatment needed for our water, because rainwater for flushing toilets does not need treatment. To collect the rain, we installed a smooth, clean metal roof with gutters. Downspouts on every corner of the roof channel the rain into underground pipes. Some of these downspouts are clear, giving visitors an inside look at the water rushing down. The water from the downspouts flows through filters to remove leaves and debris and then pours into the underground cistern. The cistern lies below our prairie porch, the concrete deck where student activities take place. We marked the spot to show visitors where the cistern lies. It's about 7 feet wide, 20 feet long, and 7 feet deep. It stays dark underground and no algae grow, keeping the water clean and healthy. When the cistern is full, it holds just over 5,500 gallons of rainwater. If it is already full and it's still raining, we have an overflow area, filtering the water as it drains down into the soil. We circulate the water through a high-tech, ultraviolet sterilization system to keep it clean and fresh. By code, rainwater stored in a cistern can be used only for activities that do not touch your skin. That means you can use rainwater for flushing toilets and doing the laundry, but not for brushing your teeth, cooking, or taking a shower. Using rain to flush our toilets should help us save about 77,000 gallons per year, or enough water to fill more than 11 tanker trucks. A computer system tracks how much rainwater we are using every day from the cistern. You can benefit at home by collecting water from your roof. Think about installing a rain barrel to water your landscape with rainwater. You can buy one from a garden center or through your local county extension office. If you'd like to learn more about how our new buildings save water and energy, visit our website at www.archbold-station.org.
Thank you, Margaret. I just think that is so cool. And I actually assumed it would be raining this morning when we were planning this out. So I was like, oh, it'll be cool. I'll be able to show them the rain actually going down those see-through tubes and that kind of thing. But maybe it'll happen a little bit later when we get to the Q&A section after 10 o'clock. But I just love that harvesting the rain. I know that some people do have rain barrels at home, and I think that is a really cool idea. And here, I mean, this is a building that can support, we've got something like 1,000 visitors a year to this building, and we're able to supply almost all the water we need just by, for flushing the toilets, just by collecting that rainwater. It's pretty awesome. Another big part of having an area with a low impact environmentally is thinking about what plants you're going to plant there. You notice that this doesn't look like a typical yard, which look kind of like golf courses, with trimmed grass all the same height. Out here, this feels more like we're out in a meadow with wildflowers, and out here, depending on the time of the year, you'll see different flowers blooming. You'll have honeybees and other insects around here, butterflies, because this is filled with all kinds of different plants from Florida. So you'd call those native plants that have been in Florida for hundreds and hundreds or thousands of years. And the other part of that, like the reason for that, besides just because we want to teach people about Florida, is that those plants are Florida friendly. They're used to Florida. They don't need us to put down fertilizer. They don't need us to put a hose on them and water them. Why? Well, because they've been dealing with nature for a long, long time. They're used to it. Now, I think that one of the best ways to make a change at your home to help the environment is to put in a Florida-friendly landscape. It doesn't have to look like this. It can look all different ways. And it's not always just Florida native plants. Maybe there's other plants that you really like, that are really pretty, or for some reason you like them, and they're not from Florida, but you can look and see, will they survive here without needing to be watered? Will they survive without needing that fertilizer? So when we first put this in, we did have water going for the first year. Once everything was established, then it was okay. We have about 100 species right here. Let me show you just one real pretty flower. This one was actually planted by some summer campers here a few years ago, and it makes me very happy to see that it's still alive. It's called false rosemary. You can see it looks a lot like the rosemary you would eat. Beautiful little flowers here. I'll turn my camera around so we can take a peek at these flowers a little closer up. Here we go. Beautiful, beautiful flowers. And you see this one would have, get back in focus. There we go. So it would have insects like a bee coming in the middle there. And then you notice those little structures on the top part of the flower. When the bee comes in, it would have the pollen would be on those structures there and would get stuck to the bee. So it's pretty clever because the bee's sticking its head down in the middle there while it's getting the pollen stuck on its head. These are really pretty. Let's see. Let's take a look at another one. Here's one more. And those little dots there are like a landing strip to help the bees know where to come in. Little landing strip for the bees right there. Let me switch this around. Come in. There we go. So where did I get these? How did I find seed for these? I went to a Florida native plant nursery, and you can look online and go to the Florida Native Plant Society, or FAN is the Florida Association of Native Nurseries, and they're throughout the state, and they specialize in finding and selling Florida plants. Love it. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about is, besides the plants here, is the pavement. So if you notice below me here, instead of regular pavement, we have rocks. Any idea why we put rocks here? Well, for one, it's pretty. But besides the fact that it looks cool, why do we use rocks instead of regular pavement right here? If you have any ideas, type them in the chat. While you're thinking about it, I'm going to pick up a couple because I know that we showed you some of these like a few weeks ago, but they're very cool. Let me grab a few here. I'm going to show you these rocks come from Florida. They're Florida limestone rocks. And what is a limestone rock? Well, limestone rock is actually the bodies of marine creatures. The bodies of marine creatures. So can you see a little shell in there? And in Florida, back in the day, millions of years ago, we're underwater. All of Florida was underwater for a long time. And so the coral and the little sea creatures died and left their bodies behind. And it ended up forming Florida limestone in Florida. There's different kinds of limestone around the world. This one has all these fossils in it. It's called fossiliferous limestone. You can see that. It's pretty amazing. I've got a couple more here. let's turn the camera around and show you these a little closer. It's amazing to think that these little grooves here. Oh, look, see, there's some really small, there's some big grooves there from a larger shell. And then I see at least 2 smaller shells embedded in there as well. It's amazing to think that this rock that we're standing on is the bodies of, millions or billions of ancient marine creatures. I'm gonna drop that one. Let's see, I've got another one here. It's another little shell right there. Let's see what else here. I've got this one. This one looks like coral. I'm not sure if it is or not. I'm not a geologist, but all those little holes make me think of coral. Oh, but here we go. Beautiful. Can you believe that? I mean, this is millions and millions of years old here, back from when Florida was under the ocean. I mean, I'm on the Lake Wales Ridge at Archbold, which is a big sandy spot in the middle of the state, and we're standing on about 300 feet of sand. But once you start digging further than that, you'll find areas with limestone. Okay, let's see. I've got one more here. One more. Oh, look at all the little pock marks in this one. This is the one, I said the other one looked kind of like coral. This is the one that really looks like coral to me. Amazing. Oh, it's so beautiful. I saw that in the chat, someone's figured out why we have these. It's for drainage. And you might not think about like rainwater being a problem, like it's just water, why does it matter where it goes? Well, normally with all of our roads and on the streets and all of that, that rainwater can really end up flowing down and bringing a lot of nasty stuff with it down into our lakes and rivers. And that's not great when you concentrate all of the different pollutants in there into our lakes and rivers. But if we have something like this that's permeable, where the water can naturally soak down in there, then it can also keep that nasty stuff from all congregating in our waterways. And it helps feed our aquifers below our feet, where the water soaks down under our feet. And then that's there for people to use for wells and drinking water and all that good stuff. Okay, let's bring on our first guest. We have Tori from the Avian Ecology Lab, and she's going to tell us a little bit about scrub jays. Tori, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to turn my video and stuff off and hand it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so my name's Tori Bakley, and I'm an avian ecology intern here at Archbold. I've been here for a little bit over a month. And in our lab, we study the Florida scrub jay. And the Florida scrub jay is the only species of bird that's endemic to Florida. So it's the only bird that can only be found in Florida. So there are a few scrub jay species that can be found like in California or in Mexico or in the surrounding areas. But the Florida scrub jay is only here, and that makes it pretty unique. They are very social. Their social structures and the way the individuals interact with each other is pretty different from the species out west. And so that's kind of what our lab focuses on, is learning about these social structures and their territory dynamics. So the birds kind of live in their little family groups. They always have one breeder female and one breeder male. And oftentimes these birds will have their babies, and then those babies might stick around with their parents for a year or two, sometimes 3 or 4, and they'll help raise the next babies. So right now, we currently have some nestlings and some fledglings, and babies from last year or the year before are currently helping out feeding these babies and hanging out in the territories with their parents. I do want to note that we have specific permits and training for what we do here. So we are specifically trained to work with these birds and to handle their fledglings. So I encourage you to look at the wildlife in your neighborhood, but definitely if you find a nest or something, definitely want to leave it alone and give it some space. If you do find an animal that you think is in need, you can always call your local rehabber, and parents will always take their babies back, whether it's a bird or a squirrel or a fawn, but definitely call a rehabber if you think there's something wrong. So we look at our Florida scrub jay groups. So we have our territories that we kind of know where these birds hang out. So we can go to the next slide. And so we'll go to these territories and find the birds that we know live there, and we'll kind of watch their behavior. And based on where they go, we'll follow them and hopefully find their nest. So we're currently in breeding season and nesting season. So that's our top priority. So you can see the photo in the middle is a freshly made nest that I found. I saw the female sitting on it. So she was just patting down some of those fibers. The fibers are from the palmettos that are really common in the scrub. And the nests are usually in scrub oaks, which you can see there. And they're really common out here in the Florida scrub. And so when we find a nest, we flag it. So you can see that photo on the right is an example of the flagging that we'll do so that we can really easily find the nest afterwards. So we'll check the nests every few days to see how they progress, if they're gaining eggs, if they're losing eggs, or if the eggs are hatching. And we don't really want to disturb the nest too much, so we'll follow the flags to make sure we find it exactly and don't accidentally bump into it or something. And we can go to the next slide. So the scrub jays will lay 1 to 5 eggs. Usually they'll average around 3 or so. But you can see on the left, there's 2 eggs in that nest, and that clutch was complete. So they were finished laying, and then we kept checking that nest every 3 or so days until we saw this little baby on the right. That baby is freshly hatched that day the photo was taken. You can see it's kind of the same size as the egg. If you were to kind of curl that baby up, it would still probably fit in there. So that one was freshly hatched, very cute and very small. We can look at the next slide. So we do have a video. It looks like it's messed it's on its side, but you can see this breeder female was heavily defending her nest, and she didn't want to hop off of there. But I did have to check to see how many babies were under there, and she had 4. So I carefully looked under there and counted, and then I immediately left and gave her space. Yeah, so next. Yeah, we can go back to that last slide really quick. Yes. So you'll see the photo on the left are some freshly hatched babies, and on the right, those babies are about a week old, probably. And next slide. So at day 11, we'll revisit the nest. Here we have another video that's not quite coming through correctly. And you can see the photo on the right really clearly. These day 11 babies are very, they're pretty big, but their feathers aren't quite grown in all the way. So you can see they kind of appear as little pins, but they're nice and tucked in there, and the parents are feeding them at the nest then. So we'll go in on day 11, and that's when we band the birds. So every bird has a little color band, and that's how we identify them. And we can go to the next slide. So when the birds are 18 days old, we'll go out again and see if they have fledged. So that can be kind of hard, and you can see in the photos that there's actually fledglings in each one. They're right in the middle of each photo. They're kind of hard to find, but it's really cute because they'll fledge from the nest and then kind of hang around in that area, but the parents will still feed them because they can't fly or really do much yet. Next slide. And here's another video. This is a video of the parents feeding their fledglings. So the fledglings will sit in the nest or in some bushes in the scrub. This can be pretty far from the nest as well, but the parents will still come and bring them food, and you can see their little bands. And so we'll continue going out to check on these fledglings and see how they do. but that's currently where we are in the nesting season right now, is finding our fledglings and checking to see if they're okay.
Thank you, Tori. Cool. To another intern in the Avian Ecology Lab in a minute, but before I do, I just want to show you one more thing with the building here, and that is the window. Take a look at the how we have this part in the middle here that's taller than the rest of the building in the middle. This is our breezeway, and we call those up there clerestory windows. So there's only one floor here, but then those windows are up nice and high. So this whole middle area doesn't need air conditioning. And if you look really close, you'll see we actually have a couple of our researchers are working in there, a nice spot in the shade. We get a little bit of a breeze coming through here. It's a really nice area. So part of it is having a nice area you can work in that doesn't need all that energy for air conditioning. The other part is, I wish I could show you this a little bit. It's kind of hard to do it on here, but if you could really see the windows up there, you might be able to notice that the windows facing south are smaller than the windows facing north. And that is because the sun tends to be more in the south and is intense in Florida. So you have your small windows, you protect yourself from the sun on that side, and then you have your nice big windows on the north to let in lots of light. And you can also see that these things right here are next to the windows that go built into rooms that reflects light into the rooms. So we don't even always put on our lights inside of our rooms. There's so much natural light in the building. Okay, all right, let's go back to our other intern. This is Grace, and she's gonna finish us here, and then we'll take some questions at the end. And I already saw in the chat, we have some questions. I see Jan's back, Karen's back, and we got some really good questions. So we'll get to those after Grace. Okay, Grace, are you with us?
Yes, hi, Mr. Dustin, thank you.
Wonderful, I'll turn my stuff off of here and you can take over.
Okay. There we go, Margaret, thank you. So everyone, hi everyone, my name is Grace Trankina. I'm also an intern here at the Avian Ecology Lab at Archbold Biological Station. And when I'm not looking for nests and checking on nestlings, I'm also researching a little bit about a really interesting scrub jay behavior. And scrub jays actually will act as sentinel, which is what we'll get into. And I'm looking to see how that is related to pair bond duration. We'll go ahead with the next slide, please. Thank you. So a little bit of interesting behavior traits about the Florida scrub jay. Breeding pairs are monogamous, meaning that they only will stay with each other within a breeding season. And unlike a lot of other birds, they actually will mate for life. So unless one of the individuals in the breeder pair either dies or divorce is very uncommon, but otherwise the pairs will stay together for the duration of their lives. They're also cooperative, which Tori kind of explained with once the fledglings become independent, they kind of hang out with their parents and will help the next generation of jays. And they also they do sentinel coordination. So I'll get into in the next slide, I kind of have what that means and how it's a really interesting evolutionary trait of the jays. Go ahead with the next slide, please. So what is sentinel behavior? Sentinel is another kind of synonym for guarding. So a lot of times I like to think of it as like they're taking watch. So when a scrub jay is foraging or feeding on the ground, generally they have their head down and they're unable to detect any predators around them. So they kind of will take turns between somebody will watch and alert the rest of the group if they see a predator. They kind of do a loud squawk, or like they call it a weep, and alert the rest of the group to what's going on. And while you're foraging and not paying attention, one other one will look out for the entire group. And there's a lot of different things that will go into how they coordinate this. So the next slide, I think I have explaining what Sentinel coordination is. So why would they feel motivated to coordinate? Basically, by having one jay up at a time within the group, they will reduce the gaps when nobody is paying attention. So if they're all foraging, then they are putting themselves at risk, basically, and they have to keep that vigilance up for the group in order to make sure that they can live to that next season and have that next brood. And they also want to reduce the time where they have more than one jay acting sentinel, because basically when they've got, like I've got this picture with 3 up in a tree, when the job really only takes 1. So you could be foraging or, feeding yourself, feeding your current brood of nestlings. So by reducing that gap in having either no acting sentinel or more than one acting sentinel, it's kind of this ideal system of like trade-off between who's up and who's down. And there's a lot that goes into how good they can be at this. So I think I've got another slide here. So what affects how good they are at coordinating? So group size is definitely one, and as a lot of these scrub jay groups will have more and more fledglings and more babies being part of their group, it might change a little bit as far as it's been described in some papers as, when a group of people are sitting at a dinner and the check comes, it's like, well, who's going to reach for their wallet? It's like kind of this, when it's just 2 people, it might be a lot easier to coordinate something, but as the group gets bigger and bigger, they kind of change that behavior. Also, habitat has been a really interesting one. So there's a lot of variance in this scrub as far as vegetative structure, like the height. So there can be, jays prefer a more recently burned habitat, whereas if it gets too overgrown, they generally don't do as well. So overgrown habitat is one. And I'm looking at in my free time is if pair bond duration will affect that, because the jays mate for life. They will have more familiarity with their partner and more familiarity with their surroundings because they've stayed with that partner and that same family group for a long duration of time. So my question is if that pair bond duration increases the degree of sentinel coordination. So I think that's all I have. I've got a few more pictures as my last slide, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Grace. Before we get to the Q&A, I just want to show you, this is our sign here for our lead platinum. And I encourage you, when you're traveling around, whenever you're visiting, say a museum or something like that, or even could be a mall or wherever you are, see if you notice any signs that that tell you that building is an environmentally friendly building. LEED is the certifier here, so it's the leadership in energy and environmental design, LEED, and platinum is the highest level you can get in that. In fact, Archbold, when we built these, we were only the 12th commercial building in all of Florida to have a LEED platinum building. So that was like really exciting for us. Okay, I know we have questions already that were coming in. So before we get to them, I just want to say thank you for joining us again. It's been so wonderful. We only have one more week before we take a break before our summer programs start. So one more week, so make sure you get all those questions that you've got out there. And who knows what will happen in the fall. Probably we'll end up doing something like this again. I don't know. So thank you. Hasta pronto, amigos. Hope to see you soon, my friends. And let's go to some Margaret. Can you help with these questions?
Hi, yes, we do. If Grace and Tori are around, there are definitely a lot of questions about scrub jays in general. So I'll start, and either of you can answer. I know you both are very informative on this topic, but Karen wants to know, what do scrub jays make their nest out of, and do both male and females build their nest?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. They build their nest, they have like the main structure, and that's made out of little sticks and twigs, usually from the scrub oaks. So there's a couple different species here, but they're all in the genus Quercus. And so if you wanted to Google that, you could, but it's just like a general oak. And then within that big structure, they'll have the inside that's padded kind of, and that's made out of fibers from palmetto. It's like sable palms. So those are pretty common in Florida. And so you might have seen them on the palm frond. There's little fibers that kind of hang off like little strings. And so they'll pluck those off and then weave them into their nest.
And I'm sorry, did you say do both males and females?
Yes, I forgot. They both will help build the nest. Sometimes more than others, but it kind of just depends on the group.
And then a question about sentinel behavior is, do you know if any other bird species pay attention to the scrub jay's call and benefit from their alarm calls?
That is a really interesting question. I don't know too much work that's been done on like the conspecifics of other species of birds in the area kind of pick up on, hey, when the scrub jay does that, that means there's something around that might hurt me. But I do know, because all of our scrub jays live, in these distinct family units, they will alert like their neighbors. So say I've got a close next door neighbor, they might hear me and to pick up on that. So other jays will alert other families, but I'm not too sure about other species. It's an interesting question.
I can just hop on this one a little bit. I don't know if we published this or not, but I've heard this multiple times from the researchers here that eastern towhees definitely are listening in to the Florida scrub jay calls. And sometimes when you're out looking at the jays, you'll see eastern towhees hanging around with them. So they've kind of learned to mooch off of them, and they don't have to worry so much about predators if they've got a scrub jay family around. So I don't know what other families of birds or what other species are listening to the jays, but at least one, the eastern towhee.
And then another question about sentinel duty is, do the parent birds spend more time guarding than the young that are helping out? Maybe like a year-old helper.
Yes, they very much do. So the breeder male spends the most time on sentinel. The breeder female comes second. And it's kind of funny once we start getting some of these yearlies and fledglings. Until they've reached about a year, the parents don't really trust what they say. They might alarm call to everything. They're just very alert to, and the parents are like, okay, come on, we know. So once they become independent, they will fall right below the breeder pair.
Awesome. And then for either of you, what predators do the Florida jays have?
They have a couple different predators. Typically, snakes are their like primary predator. So we have the eastern coachwhip, and they'll often like rob nests. So they might eat eggs or eat fledglings, unfortunately. So we do see that occasionally. And the indigo snake is also a common nest predator. And then besides snakes, you might have other birds. So like hawks or crows or something could come through and get to a nest. And occasionally mammals could also come and predate a nest, like a raccoon or a bobcat could get an adult jay. So it kind of depends on the time of day. So if it's a nocturnal predator, the jays are pretty weak. They don't really have a strong defense. And then as far as big snakes go, the adults might try to save themselves over defending a nest super hard. But yeah, definitely snakes are a primary predator.
And is there any male-female dimorphism? Dimorphism, there you go.
There is not. To the human eye, the male and the females are indistinguishable. Birds do see in the UV spectrum, so they themselves can tell between the male and the female. For our benefit, we actually individually and uniquely color band all of the jays, so we're able to tell the individuals apart that way.
And at what age do the young try to set up their own territory for nesting? Or maybe, do they automatically make a new territory? How does that work with the families?
Okay, so it kind of depends on the age. Usually they'll stay with their parents until at least 1 or 2 years old. Usually breeding starts around 2, and they can get territories in different ways. It's usually the males. So the helper males will be the ones to gain a territory. And they can do this by going to an area that isn't occupied. So this would be a de novo territory. They can also take a piece of their parents' territory. So this would be called a bud. So they'll take a little chunk of their dad's territory and claim it as their own and have their own breeder there. And that's a little easier because it's easier to defend against your family than other birds. And then sometimes you'll see a replacement. And so that's when maybe a breeder dies and maybe a female breeder dies. So there's just a male breeder left, and the female breeder will, or a female helper will find that there's that opening and she'll take it, and then they'll breed there. But yeah, usually around 2 is when they'll start getting away and trying to find breeding space.
And how many scrub jays are there here at Archbold?
So Grace and I are just talking about this. We don't know the exact number, but there's definitely at least between 200 and 300 individuals that we study right now on our demo tract. So we have about 80 territories, and each territory has at least 1 breeder female and 1 breeder male. And then most of the groups have at least a few helpers. So that'll give you about 200 or 300 individuals.
And how far north in Florida does the range go?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's some, they kind of reach the northern end of the Lake Wales Ridge. And I believe that's in Osceola County. And so it's not up into the Panhandle. They're definitely in the peninsula. So you won't find them up near in Tallahassee or in Jacksonville, but they'll be a little further south than that.
And then back to when you were talking about the birds, starting new territories or filling a breeding position, do the birds interbreed with their own family if a parent dies, or do they have distinct family lineages?
They definitely avoid breeding with family. So usually the females will travel really far distances to find new mates. And so inbreeding is really uncommon with the Florida scrub jays. And just because they do know who their family is, and that's pretty, it's really noticeable when you see them interact. They know each individual and they know each other. And since we do have all the individuals banded and we've had this project for so long, we know the histories of all these birds too. So if we were to see 2 birds that looked like they were mating that were together, we would know it. So they usually avoid inbreeding.
And still on the territory topic, if the bird cannot find open territory to establish a family group, do you know what they do?
I can answer this one. So a lot of times, so right now we had a really big boom of nestlings in 2019. So we've got a ton of 2-year-olds on the track that are just really, really fighting for some space. So say they can't, if their parents are still alive and together in their territory, there wouldn't be a replacement. And either those males will try to bud a piece of the parents' territory, and say that's not successful. Generally, I think they will try to just go further and try to defend as hard as they can. There's a lot of calamity happening, and jays, they're trying to really get as much territory as possible with no constraints. They would have, as many acres as they could. So when there's a lot of groups out there like that, they just fight really hard for as much space as they can get, and each year progressively try to grow that space into be a successful territory.
And what sorry, excuse me, was their range historically a lot larger? And are they currently occupying the space that they'd be found originally in?
So they are habitat specific. So they specifically live in the Florida scrub, and the main issue is development and like housing, like neighborhoods and communities growing, and they're shrinking this scrub habitat. And so there are scrub jays that do live in urban areas, so they'll live in neighborhoods and things like that, but they definitely do prefer like pure Florida scrub. And so there's a few like scrub jay groups that are outside of our study area and in local neighborhoods, and those are studied, and they have slightly different behaviors from or tendencies from the scrub jays that live in the Florida scrub versus the urban setting. So their range might not necessarily be a lot smaller, but it is because the scrub habitat is getting destroyed for development.
I can jump in on this one too. We have a long-term project in an area right near here called the Placid Lakes Development, where a lot of Archbold staff actually live. It's just right up the road. And it used to have a lot of scrub jays when they started the project 25 years ago, where it was, I'm not sure. There was something like 120 families of Florida scrub jays, more than at Archbold. And we watched over, I think it was a period of 2 decades or something like that. We watched the number drop. And now there's some out there. They're still persisting, but there's not many. So there's a lot of unknowns there that we don't know. But so the question is like, yes, they can be in urban areas, kind of, but they do need the scrub next to the urban area. And we do have a lot of issues with people's house cats going outside and eating birds, or people's lawns. Most people's lawns don't look like this landscaping here. So they might be using pesticides and that type of thing on their lawn. So there's not the insects there for the young to eat. And people will feed them peanuts, and they'll come right to your house. They'll knock on the window. Hey, it's time to feed me. And it's a wonderful nature experience. But that's kind of like going to McDonald's every day and getting some big, what do they call it, supersized thing or whatever. They love it. It's got a lot of calories in those peanuts, but it's not natural for them to be eating that every day. So that'll set their bodies into thinking it's time to breed and lay their eggs, but it'll be out of sync with what's happening in nature. So they'll start doing it a little too early, and the insects aren't back yet. So there's a lot of issues, and we're trying to understand some of those. But basically, the best way to protect them is to have nature preserves with good scrub that's managed with fire. Sorry, that was a long appendice to add on to that, but it's really interesting stuff.
So we are running a bit short on time at this point, and there are a ton of really great questions. As usual, we will be sending out an email to our participants, answering all the questions we didn't get a chance to discuss today. I am going to change the topic just slightly because there's a lot of discussion about bird strikes in the chat right now. And I thought that'd be an interesting thing to address about what we do here at Archbold with these buildings to avoid bird strikes. Dustin, if you'd like to address that.
Yeah, it's a good topic. And that's one thing I'm sad to say, we haven't actually done anything specific for bird strikes here, only that our building isn't like a big giant building filled with windows, which is when you go to a downtown area and you see those beautiful reflective buildings, I just want to cry because they're probably killing hundreds of birds a year. In the 8 years I've been here, I have found 2, maybe 3 birds that died from window strikes on these buildings. And I'm sure I've missed other ones, so maybe it's 2 or 3 times that. That's not a lot. But yeah, maybe we should put some, you can buy stickers to put on there. So the one person in the chat was using some kind of cloth on theirs. So there's different products you can buy to help with that.
I will add, just from observation standpoint, I did one of my senior thesis on bird strikes in the school I went to in New Orleans, and I do feel that a lot of our windows here are slightly shaded, so it's actually not super reflective for the sun, and you can see through that there are spaces behind the window. And so I've been here for I guess about 7 months at this point, and I've yet to see a bird strike, which is something I'm pretty heavily focused on and always looking out for. And so I've been surprised that we don't actually have anything up, but it seems to not be a major issue. But I do think that often leads to the fact that our windows are relatively transparent based on where like the sun's hitting them, which works definitely in our favor. Okay.
Part of the design.
Absolutely. So I believe I'm going to stop us here because we have so many other great questions, and I think that it'll be best if we just answer all of them in our follow-up email. Per usual, if you are on Facebook, you can sign up for our Zooms on Archbold, and you can be added to this list as well. Thank you, Grace and Tori, so much for coming and joining us today. That was really interesting. Obviously sparked a lot of conversation, and the scrub jays are just wonderful species and great to hear about. Dustin, do you have anything else to add?
I don't know if I've ever seen that many questions come flying in fast and furious. It's not like we don't have 100 people on. There's not that many people on these. And that's so cool. So I think it shows for Tori and Grace, how appreciative the viewers are that you're here. And I know Margaret and I are very thankful too. You got people really going. I know there were several questions about the native landscaping and some of those other green features. And like Margaret said, we just don't have time to get into all of them. And that's such a can of worms. That is such a huge can of worms. And you could talk to different landscape people and they'd all have different ideas, different answers for you. But I guess the one thing I'll say is that a Florida-friendly or native landscaping in your yard does not mean just set it and forget it. You do have to still do some management in there. You're not watering it. You're not using fertilizer, probably not using pesticides, but you do have weeds still. Nature does its thing. So you do want to have a plan. It's not just plant it and leave it. And some things will die. And also because the weather is different every year. I've seen over the 8 years here, I've watched this is only 2.5 acres. I've watched the landscape change over those 8 years of different plant communities kind of coming in and then leaving. And it's so cool to be at the same place. It's a landscape, but it's like a natural area, and actually get to watch it change is really cool. Okay, so I won't keep going on with that. Thank you all so much for being here, and have a great week. We've got one more next Tuesday. Hope to see you there. Thank you.
Ready. Bye, y'all. Thanks. See you next time.